For more than 6 decades, Anthony Hopkins has been one of the most respected names in Hollywood. A man whose voice could silence an entire room, whose performances could make audiences forget they were watching a movie, and whose presence on screen became unforgettable. But behind the awards, the fame, and the legendary roles, there was another story, a quieter story, a story about the people who stood beside him, the people who changed him, and the people whose memories stayed with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. At 86 years old, Anthony Hopkins has spent a lifetime looking back at the road behind him, a road filled with incredible success, painful lessons, unexpected changes, and relationships that shaped the man the world came to know. Because when someone reaches that stage of life, the biggest memories are rarely about money, fame, or trophies. They are about the faces that appeared during the difficult moments, the voices that offered comfort, and the people who left a permanent mark on the heart. Anthony Hopkins' journey was never a simple one. Born in Wales, far away from the bright lights of Hollywood, he began as a young man searching for his place in the world. He was not always the confident legend audiences see today. Like many great artists, he carried doubts, struggles, and personal battles that followed him through different chapters of his life. Before millions knew his name, there were people who believed in him when nobody else was watching. There were mentors who guided him, friends who supported him, and loved ones who helped him discover the strength hidden inside him. The first person who shaped Anthony Hopkins' path was someone many successful people never forget, the person who gave him their first chance. For Hopkins, that journey began in the world of theater. The stage became the place where he learned discipline, emotion, and the power of storytelling. It was there that he discovered that acting was not simply pretending to be someone else. It was understanding human pain, human dreams, and human emotions. The teachers and performers around him helped build the foundation of the actor he would eventually become. Their influence stayed with him as he moved from British theater into international cinema. But success did not arrive overnight. Like many legends, Hopkins experienced years of uncertainty before the world recognized his talent. There were moments when he questioned his direction, moments when the future seemed unclear. And during those times, the people around him became more important than any award he would later receive. Hollywood often shows audiences the final chapter of a person's success. The red carpets, the applause, the interviews, the celebrations. But rarely do people see the quiet moments before the fame arrives, the sacrifices, the loneliness, and the relationships that keep someone moving forward when recognition is still far away. As Hopkins' career grew, so did the number of people who entered his life. Some stayed for decades. Some appeared only briefly. But each person left something behind. Some gave him encouragement. Some gave him honesty. Some gave him lessons that were difficult to learn, but impossible to forget. And among all those memories, there were 5 people whose influence remained especially powerful. The first was someone connected to the very beginning of his artistic journey, a figure who helped shape his understanding of acting and performance. Without those early influences, the world may never have seen the extraordinary performances that later defined Anthony Hopkins' career. The second person was someone who understood the man behind the actor, someone who saw beyond the fame and recognized the struggles, fears, and hopes hidden behind the public image. Because fame can attract thousands of people, but only a few truly understand who someone is when the cameras are gone. For Hopkins, those relationships became a reminder that success means very little without genuine human connection. Throughout his career, he portrayed some of the most complex characters ever placed on screen. He played kings, criminals, fathers, and unforgettable personalities. But the roles that audiences remember were only part of his story. The real Anthony Hopkins existed away from the spotlight, surrounded by people who knew his real personality, people who saw his humor, people who saw his vulnerability, people who saw the person behind the legend. And as he entered his later years, those memories became more valuable than ever, because eventually every great actor reaches the same realization. The greatest achievements are not the awards sitting on shelves. They are the relationships that remain in the heart. Anthony Hopkins' story is not only about Hollywood history. It is about time, change, forgiveness, and the people who help us become who we are. The world knows him as an Oscar-winning actor, a legend, an icon. But behind that image is a man who has loved, lost, learned, and continued moving forward. And when looking back at a lifetime filled with unforgettable moments, these 5 people represent something far more meaningful than fame. They represent the memories that shaped him, the lessons that changed him, and the connections that he carried with him through every chapter of his remarkable journey. As Anthony Hopkins looked back at the many chapters of his extraordinary life, one truth became clearer than anything else. The moments that mattered most were not the moments when the world was watching. They were the quiet moments shared with the people who truly knew him, the people who saw him before the fame, the people who stood beside him during difficult seasons, the people who reminded him that behind every great achievement, there is always a human story. And among those memories, there were 3 more figures whose impact reached far beyond ordinary friendship. The third person who shaped Anthony Hopkins' life was someone who challenged him to become better. Because sometimes the people we remember most are not the ones who make life easy. They are the ones who force us to grow. Throughout his career, Hopkins worked with some of the greatest minds in entertainment, directors, writers, and fellow actors who pushed him beyond his comfort zone and helped him discover new levels of creativity. Every unforgettable performance requires more than talent. It requires someone who believes an artist can go further than they imagine. For Hopkins, those creative relationships became part of his legacy. They reminded him that acting was never about becoming famous. It was about understanding people, understanding their emotions, their fears, their struggles. And every time he stepped in front of camera, he carried those lessons with him. But perhaps the most meaningful relationships in Hopkins' life were not only connected to his career, they were connected to his personal journey. Because behind every public success story, there are private moments that only a few people ever see. There were moments of happiness, moments of regret, moments of change. Like many people, Hopkins experienced periods where life forced him to look inward and reconsider what truly mattered. Fame can create an illusion that everything is perfect, but even the most successful people face battles that the audience never sees. And during those times, the people who remain beside you become the ones you remember forever. The fourth person who left a lasting impact on Hopkins was someone connected to his personal transformation, someone who represented a different chapter of his life, a reminder that people can change, that mistakes do not have to define the entire story, that every person has the ability to begin again. Over the years, Hopkins became known not only for his acting ability, but also for his honesty about his own experiences. He spoke openly about the importance of growth, discipline, and appreciating the life in front of him. Those lessons did not come from success alone. They came from experience, from moments that tested him, from people who helped him see life from a different perspective. And that is why certain relationships become unforgettable. They do not simply give us happiness. They change the way we see ourselves. They influence the decisions we make. They become part of our identity. For someone like Anthony Hopkins, whose life has included worldwide recognition, the value of those connections became even greater with time. Because the older we become, the more we understand that memories are the true treasures we collect. Not the awards, not the headlines, not the attention. The memories, the conversations, the people. And then there was a fifth person, the one who represented perhaps the deepest lesson of all, the person connected to love, understanding, and the human need to feel accepted. Because at the end of a remarkable journey, every person wants to know one thing. Who was there when nobody else was watching? Who offered support without expecting anything in return? Who created memories that remained powerful even after many years had passed? For Hopkins, those answers were connected to the people who walked beside him through different stages of life. Some relationships lasted for decades. Some lasted only for a chapter. But each one contributed something important to the person he became. The world often remembers Anthony Hopkins as the brilliant actor who delivered unforgettable performances, the intense voice, the powerful presence, the incredible talent. But those who look deeper see another story. A story about a man who experienced the same emotions as everyone else. A man who searched for meaning. A man who learned from his mistakes. A man who discovered that the greatest achievements are not measured by applause. They are measured by the people whose lives you touched and the people who touched yours. At 86, Anthony Hopkins represents something rare. A career that has survived generations. a legacy that continues inspiring millions, and a life filled with moments that prove even legends are shaped by ordinary human connections. The people he loved most were not simply names from his past. They were pieces of his journey. They were reminders of where he came from. They were proof that behind every legendary figure, there's a personal story filled with emotion, challenges, and unforgettable memories. Because in the end, when the lights fade and the cameras stop recording, what remains is not the fame. What remains is love. The people who believed in you. The people who stood beside you. The people who helped create the story of your life. And for Anthony Hopkins, those memories will always be the most valuable performance of all. A performance not written by a screenwriter, not captured on film, but lived every single day.